The meeting of the Louisa County Planning Commission together for January 11th, regular meeting. My name is Josh Gillespie. I'm the Director of the Department of Community Development, and I am the Secretary to the Planning Commission. This is an organizational meeting, and in this organizational meeting, first of the year, the Planning Commission shall elect officers. So let's see, I should have my agenda I should have the agenda in front of me. I'm not being a very good chair here. All right, so the first order of business is election of a chair. Do we have nominations?
Mr. Secretary?
I'm sorry, I have a notice from Mr. Quarles to be
All right,
recognized.
By all means.
I would like to nominate Mr. John Disasway for chair.
All right, we have a nomination.
Moves, motion to be closed?
Second for Mr. Goodwin, and nominations be closed.
Yes.
All right, all in favor, say aye.
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 All opposed? All right, motion carries unanimously. Mr. Chairman, I turn the gavel back to you.
Very good, thank you.
Yes, sir.
All right, next item of business is election of a vice chairman, so the chair would entertain motion on a vice chairman.
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Goodwin,
I would like to nominate Commissioner Dickinson.
Second?
we have a motion and second for Commissioner Dickerson. Any other motions?
Move to be closed?
We have a motion to close the nominations
Second?
and second. All in favor of electing Commissioner Dickerson as vice chairman, say aye. Any
Thank-
opposed?
Thank y'all. Thank y'all.
Now, before we go any further, Ms. Johnson, do you have everything you need for that? Because we'll be calling for roll call votes tonight.
Yes.
So, very good, thank you. All right, Ms. Johnson, would you do a roll call for us?
Yes.
Thank you.
Mr. Jarvis? Mr. Barlow?
Yes.
Mr. Brooks?
Here.
Mr. Weaver?
Here.
Mr. Disasway?
Here.
Mr. Kersey?
Present.
Mr. Quarles?
Here.
Mr. Goodwin?
Here.
Mr. Dickerson?
Here.
Mr. Purcell?
Here.
Thank you. Would you all please rise, and we'll have the invocation led by Commissioner Dickerson, followed by the Pledge of Allegiance led by Commissioner Quarles.
Let us pray. Father God, once again, we thank you for bringing us here together tonight. Thank you for those who came before us that established and perpetuated Louisa County. Help us to be good stewards of the human and natural resources of the county as we make decisions. Guide and direct us tonight. And then be with us as we leave this place so that we may travel safely to our homes. In your most holy name we pray. Amen.
Of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Very good. We'll move on to the approval of the agenda. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda?
So we'll move.
Motion and a second.
Second?
Moved and seconded to approve the agenda. We have one item to adjust on the agenda. Item number 2 under public hearings, LDR 2023, proposed amendments to Chapter 86 Land Development Regulations. The Planning Commission has indicated in work session the desire to defer that for a month to gather more information. So that will be deferred. Any other changes to the agenda as presented?
Move to approve.
Second?
Move to approve with the change and second. Any other discussion? All right. Ms. Johnson, would you do a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Brooks?
Yes.
Mr. Weaver?
Yes.
Mr. Disasway?
Yes.
Mr. Kersey?
Yes.
Mr. Quarles?
Yes.
Mr. Goodwin?
Yes.
Mr. Dickerson?
Yes.
Thank you. All right, next item is approval of Planning Commission meetings from, minutes from the December meeting. The Planning Commission minutes from December found in packet pages 5 through 7. Need a motion to approve the minutes as presented.
So moved?
Second. Moved and seconded. Are there any comments on the minutes? I have one item that I want to get a clarification on. on top of page 5, this is under the rezoning request for GK Structures. The statement, second sentence says, Chairman Disisway opened the public hearing and stated this item is a continuation from November 9th. Should that say open the hearing since the hearing was open? Should it simply say that the public hearing is a continuation? How would that properly be phrased? I'm looking at either Mr. Gillespie, who is nodding, so I'm looking at Mr. Mullins for proper wording, since that's a continuation. I didn't actually open the public hearing at that meeting.
There, in a previous meeting, no public hearing was opened?
In the November meeting, that public hearing was opened, and it was continued until
continued?
December. Yes.
And this is just a continuation of the same,
This is a continuation, so for the minutes of the December meeting, should it say I opened the public hearing and stated it's a continuation, or should it, because I didn't actually open the public hearing then, we continued the public hearing.
I understand, just take out the terminology that says that you opened it then. But I think either way, honestly, is fine legally. It was a continuation, but you opened the continuation at that time.
All right, then we'll leave it as is.
I
if
think
that-
that's fine.
That would be fine.
Yes, sir.
Okay, any other comments on the minutes? Very well, Ms. Johnson, would you do a roll call vote for approval of the minutes?
Mr. Brooks?
Yeah.
Mr. Weaver?
Yes.
Mr. Disisway?
Yes.
Mr. Kersney?
Yes.
Mr. Quarles?
Yes.
Mr. Goodwin?
Yes.
Mr. Dickerson?
Yes.
Thank you. Next item is consent agenda. There is no consent agenda for the January meeting, so we'll move on to the public address. Public address period is a time when members of the, or citizens can come before the Planning Commission and comment on anything that is not a part of a public hearing this evening. So if you wish to make any comments to the Planning Commission that are not a part of the public hearings we have for this evening, you'll be able to do so. You'll have 3 minutes to speak. I would ask that you state your name and your voting location when you come up. If you are representing an organization, please let me know. That affects the time you're allotted. So I'm going to open the public hearing portion now. Public hearing is open. I have several cards here. So I'd like to go through the cards first for speakers before we open up. And so I believe the first of these are all, these are, those are not. So I'll start with this one. Actually, I don't think that is either. So my apologies. We got these late, and actually, it's this stack. Yes, it's this stack. Very good. Y'all are going to wish you'd elected a different chairman. Anyhow, so we'll start with Gloria Pope. Next up will be Jane Gallagher. Ms. Pope?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Gloria Pope, and I live in Patrick Henry District. And I've come to say that we have basically overgrown the space that we have for our recreational sports and exercise activities. Louisa County currently has very limited options for tax-paying, working-age county residents and young people to obtain regular exercise because there is nothing available for them later in the evenings or on weekends because the existing facilities are too small to accommodate them. Since the recently vacated health center building was being used to treat illness, we must now seize this opportunity to prevent further and future illness by creating a larger multi-sports and exercise facility to meet the needs of everyone, working Louisa taxpayers, retirees, and young people. Pickleball is a relatively new sport, the fastest growing sport in the country, and will most likely be added to the Olympics one day. I previously had to travel to Shore Pump or Goochland to get regular exercise like swimming, playing pickleball, or aerobic exercise. I've been playing pickleball for 3 years now, and at 75, I remain the only African American playing pickleball in Louisa to this very day. Why? Because my African American friends have not had regular exercise provided to them throughout their working years, in the evenings or on weekends, resulting in their sedentary lifestyles, various illnesses and disabilities, which have seriously compromised their health and well-being. In addition, there are no recreational sports or exercise facilities available to our students and young people or working county residents who may want to learn or play pickleball or other sports, exercise, or simply walk around an indoor gym for exercise in the winter or during inclement weather in the evenings or on weekends. Many of Louisa's retired residents have been playing pickleball have enjoyed extraordinary health benefits, such as getting off high blood pressure medication, insulin, managing their weight, or simply not feeling lonely and depressed. They have also acquired many new friends in the community by playing pickleball 3 to 5 times each week. We must stop denying all county residents equal opportunities for better health and great fun by creating a much newer and much larger indoor recreational facility and by expanding the days and hours for sports like pickleball, basketball, volleyball, and any other sports or types of exercise that we desire. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pope. Next up is Jane Gallagher. She'll be followed by Jill Schumacher.
Good evening, Chairman Justice Way and representatives of the Planning Commission. Thank you for your work for the county. I'm Jane Gallagher, and I'm with the Mineral District, and I'm here to ask for your consideration of the support of the multipurpose facility proposed by James Smith from Parks and Recs. I'm a pickleball player, and in a nutshell, as Gloria alluded to, we need more space and playtime. I forwarded each of you a picture of a day last week when 15 people were waiting to play. 16 people were on the court and 15 people waiting to play, leading to long wait lines. This is discouraging to those of us that are there to get a good workout several days a week. Please support this effort to allow our county residents of all ages to stay healthy and fit. Right now, I'd like to ask for a show of hands of everyone that is here to support the pickleball, the multipurpose room facility. Thank you. And thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Gallagher. Next up, Jill Schumacher, followed by Martin McDonald.
Good evening, and thank you for taking this time to listen to all of us. We are here to support and discuss pickleball in Louisa County. I'm happy to be here to extend my support for a new building and new facility to help expand and highlight this sport, which is still growing locally and nationally. I personally learned to play pickleball in 2016 and have loved this game as a perfect transition from playing tennis and ping pong. Throughout COVID shutdown times, the staff at the Parks and Rec worked very hard to make sure we could continue to play by establishing specific rules and limiting the number of people who could access the gym at the same time. I commend James and Justin and Jonathan for always trying to work with the community and make times available to play. But with so many other activities offered at the Betty Queen Center, that has not been an easy task. As a retiree and an active senior, it's so important to continue to move and stay involved in a living lifestyle that supports physical and mental activity. Pickleball offers both of those, as well as an opportunity for socialization with new people. Before my husband retired, it was difficult for us to find a time that we could both play together because he worked in the day and during the day, and there was no time in the evening that we could play. With new space in a new facility and new hours could be expanded, and even more people will be able to join in and have the fun. The current participants in this sport have many different levels and motivations. Some are highly competitive, and others are there just for fun and exercise. It would be smart to consider 6 to 8 courts to also allow people of all competitive levels to be able to play without having to dedicate separate sessions and limit the flexibility for all people to participate. Chrissy has made every effort to listen to players and make adjustments to satisfy the majority of the participants. But again, it's limited by needing to accommodate so many other sports and activities. Having additional space would be in keeping with so many other communities in this country, which are realizing that the intergenerational growth of this sport, as well as other things, and the need for family-centered activities. Tournaments, events, clinics could be easily arranged and held more often. Monthly memberships could be offered to collect some additional revenue. I look forward to the future of pickleball in Louisa County and commend the Louisa County Parks and Rec and the Planning Commission for having forward thinking in this manner. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ms. Schumacher. Next up is Martin McDonald.
Good evening. My name is Martin McDonald. I live in the Cuckoo District. 143. I'll get back to that in just a minute. I'm speaking this evening in favor of the proposed multi-use gymnasium. My wife, Vicki Harris, and I moved to Louisa in 2018. Excuse me. And then in February, the following year, we started playing pickleball at the Queen Center. This activity has enhanced our lives in ways we did not expect. The friends and acquaintances we have made have helped make Louisa our home. There are many statistics that show pickleball being the fastest growing sport in the U.S. However, I'd like to highlight just one, and that is pickleball here in Louisa. In 2022, 181 membership renewals to play pickleball were purchased. Last year, that number jumped to 440. That is a 143% increase. 143% increase in 1 year is a significant statistic. The vast majority of the people my wife and I play with are retired senior citizens. However, approximately a dozen or so young adults we play with have limited opportunity to participate due to their work schedules. They've expressed an interest in playing in the evenings. However, with the Betty Queen Center currently being used in the evenings for other activities, it's not possible at this time. During this year, my wife and I, along with Lee Knopfsinger and Karen and Ray Hilliard, have volunteered our time to conduct pickleball lessons monthly at the Queen Center. Last year, there were 149 men and women who attended so they may learn this game and see if it's a sport they would like to pursue or improve their pickleball skills. The proposed multi-use gymnasium, however, is not only for the rapid growth of pickleball. Currently, youth basketball programs use the Queen Center for its games. However, they have to use 4 additional facilities for practice to accommodate the large number of participants. Also, as I understand it, the new facility will include a fitness center, weight room, and a martial arts studio. And I was told this morning that martial arts is the second largest group that uses the Queen Center. Exercise and social activities are so very important for people of all ages. To be able to increase opportunities to see that expand with an additional multi-use gymnasium would continue to place Louisa County Parks, Recreation, and Transportation as one of the main assets and attractions for this county. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. McDonald. Would anyone else like to speak tonight during the public address period? Very well, come forward.
Mr. Bailey.
And again, please state your name and your voting location.
Yes. My name is Ann Bailey. I vote in Scottsville, but we've been 40-year property owners in the Patrick Henry District. We understand that you've deferred the growth overlay standards topic from your agenda, but we'd like to go ahead and address that, if we may, in this session.
Yes, and I was going to ask now, is your name again?
Royanne Bailey.
Okay, all right, then that's not associated with this request. So Just a clarification, since we have deferred the amendments on land development regulation, it was a part of the hearing tonight, but it's not going to be. So is it acceptable to have this public address at this time?
It is.
It is, very good. All right, go ahead.
All right.
Just clarifying.
Okay.
Thank you.
Good evening. I want to share some thoughts on a gray area in the 2040 Comprehensive Plan revision. I'm going to be referring to colors that are keyed on in the package on that subject. My husband and I own a 110-acre farm a half-mile south of Ferncliff on Kent Store Road. The Ferncliff growth area map clips a few acres of our property, including the part where Venable Creek flows south from across our property. We bought the place 40 years ago. It used to be a tobacco farm of Hugh Perkins. We've had an arrangement with neighbors who run beef cattle to do some bush hogging for us in exchange for growing cash crops and hay for their herds. We worked with the late Clint Cosner for 10 years, and with 3 generations of the Roy Pondexter family up until the present time. We have no problem with the Ferncliff Business Park, which we're proud of, but nobody who actually lives in the Ferncliff area wants to live in or near an industrial area. The residents' homes are all zoned A2 agricultural and either are private residences on a few acres or larger farming properties. We will not be tempted to request rezoning to go into heavy or medium industry, and we hope that the next owners of our properties won't either, although that prospect is now in grave doubt. A proposed revision to the 2040 Comprehensive Plan slaps a gray industrial area strip south across US 50 almost continuously from Shannon Hill to Zion Crossroads. Our understanding of this proposed revision is that we in Ferncliff are getting squeezed between the green machine north of Zion, who don't want industry in their backyard, and interests in Shannon Hill, who do want industry in our backyard for their own reasons. There go 12 miles of our rural vistas. Talk about a gray area. It's an ironic choice of color coding. There must be another answer to the dilemma of supporting concentrated commercial growth in particular areas of Louisa County without destroying our beautiful rural vistas that the comprehensive plan was designed to protect. We advocate for the more rosy-colored mixed use in Ferncliff with the understanding that, paraphrasing from page 17 of the 2040 plan, mixed use, quote, excludes land uses that include either heavy or medium industrial activity. There seems to be a lot of confusion about that, but that's what page 17 of the plan says. I've done a careful study of what that means, and I have concluded that only light industry is permitted in mixed use areas, not even I-1 medium industry.
Ma'am?
Thank you for your
Thank you.
attention.
Now, I do have to clarify something now. Apparently, this is not a part of what was to be deferred. This actually addresses, if I understand correctly, addresses item 3 in the public hearings to add public facilities sections to the adopted comprehensive plan, I believe, unless I misread
we were
that
talking about the
entirely.
growth
So,
overlay. No.
Mr. Eglin, can you clarify this for us?
Yes,
where
I
that
met with
fits?
Mr. and Mrs. Bailey earlier in the week to talk about the Essex project, but they also wanted to use the general public comment period to address their concerns of how the 2040 future land use map has a significant amount of industrial designation. That is what I believe her intent was to, and she plans on speaking about the Essex at a later time.
No, I understand, but so this does not apply to the item 3 public hearing?
Correct.
All right, I just wanted to clarify that because all of a sudden I was looking at what we had in item 3 and the colors on the maps for Ferncliff and that sort of thing, and I wanted to make sure we had that clarified. So thank you, Ms. Bailey.
Okay,
Yes.
I will, I understand that.
Yeah,
These are my
thank you.
general comments and the general discussion.
Thank you. All right, I have I need to clarify one thing so I get this in the right time, since we're still in the public hearing portion. Is there Spencer Jackson here tonight? Well, seeing there is none, this was an email request to speak, but it was unclear what his topic was. Since he's not here, it becomes moot, so we'll set that aside. Anyone else would like to speak tonight? Very good. Come.
I believe Mr. Bailey will be speaking about the 2040 comprehensive plan as well.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. My name is Ed Bailey. You just met my wife. We have the farm down near Ferncliff. My voting district is Scottsville, but we've had the property here for 40 years, and we feel like we're part of this community. Mr. Goodwin, I think your name is attached to the redraft of the, whoops, whoever it is.
Mr. Goodwin, raise your hand.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Goodwin. Your name is attached to the redraft
He's more
of
handsome than I
the
am.
focus plan for Ferncliff, and this is really what I wanted to talk about very briefly, and I hope this is constructive. On the first page of your redraft in the text, you refer to, actually on page 2, you refer to the Ferncliff Business Park as the Ferncliff Industrial Business Park. That's not the proper name. There's no industrial in that designation. The County Development Office does not like the word industrial in front of any of its business parks. You have the Shannon Hill Regional Business Park. You've got the Spring Creek Regional Business Park. You've got the Somerville Business Park. And of course, you have the Ferncliff Business Park, 103 acres. You don't use the word industrial because that has a negative connotation, frankly. And we all know that. Even though some of these parks are designated I-1, light industry, but you don't want to broadcast that this is industrial. And because you're going to put off prospective tenants and clients. For example, Amazon has just opened up in the Ferncliff Business Park. I don't think they'd want to be as part of an industrial park. So I think that's negative connotation then transfers to the broad designation in gray all along 250, going all the way over to Zion Cross Road, all the way down to Shannon Hill, without any specification of what you're talking about. And my point is that if I were a prospective tenant or builder for a light industry, I would be very concerned because I have no idea what the actual zoning would be, whether I would be confronting I-2 zoning, which we're going to talk about later, or am I going to have light? What am I going to have? It's just blankets the whole thing with a word that you don't use in describing any of your parks. So my recommendation is to you that when you revisit this document, which you're in the process of doing, consider carefully how you're designating that gray line. You might want to separate it with more rural, or you may actually just bite the bullet and go over and call it an industrial park. But broad gray puts people off. If I were charged with, if I had a client that said, I want to find a location that's into Virginia for light industry, and I say, oh boy, wait a minute, it's all gray. I'm not going to recommend my client move light industry there because I have no idea what you folks might put next to me. So think about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Would anyone else like to address the Planning Commission?
That's called taking one for the team.
Very well, then I'm going to close the public address period. Public address period is closed. We'll move on to unfinished business. And Mr. Gillespie, could we get a report on 2 items of unfinished business, one being a meeting on zoning in ag and forestal districts, and the other being the gateway plans?
Sure.
Such. Thank you.
Members of the commission, there was a meeting of member of the board, Mr. Williams, and member of the commission, Mr. Goodwin, this week That meeting was to talk about the zoning that that is in place as base zoning under the agriculture and forestal district designations that exist. Mr. Goodwin can kind of expound on that, but in that meeting, there was a review of each one of the 13 agricultural and forestal districts in the county and what their base zoning was and what the land uses were within the district. There's a recognition that some of the properties within the districts are split zoned. Some of those split zoned properties relate to some corridor approaches of a certain depth off a road for residential uses primarily, which don't correlate to the larger parcel that has an agricultural or forestal use on it, which qualified it for the district. There was one property identified that is in the Boswell's Tavern crossroads. If you all know the southeast corner, there's an old commercial building that appears to have gotten into the Green Springs Ag and Forestal District, and we're trying to find out how that got in there. But other than that, there's a recognition that some of the plans and dreams of 50 years ago in 1969 on the kind of prospective zoning map matching zoning to planning doesn't always match up to the ag and forestal districts. So that meeting has occurred. As it relates, I'm sorry, are there any questions about the subject?
Would either of you
Comments?
like to comment on the outcome of the meeting, or?
If I may, Mr. Chairman and members of the commission, we looked at it in looking at only properties that are within an ag and forestal designated district and are either zone commercial or industrial. There are only 2 in the entire county. And as Mr. Williams said, the squeeze ain't worth the juice. Now, the question later is, do we also want to look at residential zone property within ag and forestal districts? That we did not do. We only looked at those that were zoned either commercial, one category or another, or industrial. But only 2, and we think one of those may be a mistake. Maybe. Don't.
Right.
Got to walk the dog back to see how it got in.
Understand.
It's like a
Thank
1.7 acre parcel.
All right, thank you.
That said, there is a
Fair enough.
Yeah, fair, absolutely. There is a work product out of that research that I'll circulate to the members, along with kind of a summary memo. The meetings occurred this week, and I haven't done that yet.
Sure, thank you.
You're welcome. Related to Gateway Ordinance, Commissioner Goodwin has given some guidance related to controlled access points and shared driveways, as well as interconnected development, all of which are standards and goals within the growth area right now. None of it's codified as a requirement. So the request is to look at some priority gateways, and that's 208 at both ends of the county. On the New Bridge end, where we have a lot of suburban development on the, in the Lake Anna growth area, and on the really partially developed or mostly undeveloped lands on the other end of 208, which is at the interstate, right? And so that's our, Ferncliff North, if you will, or northern part of the Ferncliff growth area. And the growth areas have very different characters and standards, and so the request has been made to have those 2 as primary priorities, but recognize that Zion Crossroads, which we have an entire gateways plan for, that TJP, the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission, TJPDC staff, and the staffs of Louisa County and Fluvanna County, as well as the citizens of Louisa County and Fluvanna County, met on in April through June of 2022, and that plan has been briefed to the commission already about what a gateway would be without codifying requirements. So we can look at some codified requirements, mostly related to, I think, signage. We have a lot of planned development districts in the growth area already, which have their own access controls for transportation networks. And then down the interstate, kind of in priority, would be Shannon Hill, which has some development that is being controlled through developments, through designs coming from the Governor's Opportunity Fund for the Shannon Hill Business Park. And so some of the restricted access or controlled access is planned north on the north side of the Shannon Hill exit for the Shannon Hill Business Park and for the resort development that was planned a long time ago known as Clark Country. So there's not a lot of opportunity to do something that makes much difference, given that there's a kind of a consolidated control on both of those parcels in that growth area. And then the last of the interstate growth areas is Gum Spring. And it's a large growth area. It goes on both sides of the interstate. And there are assemblages of land, but there are also opportunities to spin some of those off. The reality of it is, lacking water and sewer facilities, Gum Spring has often been kind of the last of the growth areas to attract real estate investment attention of size. So anyway, that would be the priorities to establish some of those gateway standards that we've discussed with Commissioner Goodwin.
Very good. Any questions? All right.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Gillespie.
You're welcome.
Very well, then we can move on to public hearings. First item on public hearings is rezoning 2027-07 Essex Concrete Corporation. Mr. Eglin.
Good evening, Chairman, members of the Planning Commission. My name is Tom Eglin. I'm the Senior Planner for Louisa County's Community Development Department. Before you tonight is rezoning 2023-07 from the applicant and owner, RFP1 LLC, and the agent, Torrey Williams III Esquire, to rezone parcel 67-2-C, 14.59 acres, parcel 67-2-B, 13.22 acres, and parcel 67-2-A, 11.51 acres from General Commercial C2 Growth Area Overlay District to Industrial General I2 Growth Area Overlay District. All three properties are located in the Ferncliff Growth Area designated mixed use and are within the Patrick Henry Election District. The parcels are located off 3 Notch Road, Route 250, near the intersection of Route 208. The Ferncliff Growth Area's 2040 future land use map, shown on the current slide, depicts large strips of industrial designation along Route 250 east and west of the subject parcels. The subject parcels are also near the Ferncliff Business Park, which is comprised mainly of parcels zoned Industrial I-1 Growth Area Overlay District with 2 Commercial C2 Growth Area Overlay District zone parcels located at the front of the park. The proposed concrete plant on parcel 67-2-C would support the county's guiding principle of, quote, broadening the tax base by establishing businesses, end quote. The 2040 plan articulates how, quote, industrial and commercial development are integral to the county's current economic makeup, end quote. The proposed concrete plant's location provides nearby access to Ferncliff's exit on Interstate 64, which would limit truck travel through rural and residential areas of the county. Similar uses in the area include the Boxley Asphalt Plant, which is located about 6 miles west of the subject properties near the intersection of Poindexter and Route 250, and further west on Route 250 is the Allied Concrete Facility near the intersection of 15 and 250 at Zion's Crossroads. There is some rezoning history on two of the parcels that staff would like to bring to your attention. First, parcel 67-2-B, it was rezoned in 2002 from split zone agricultural A2 and general commercial C2 to fully general commercial C2. This case file can be found as enclosure 2 in your staff packet. Parcel 67-2-A in 2007 was also rezoned from agricultural A2 split zone general commercial C2 to fully general commercial C2. This case file can be found as enclosure 3 in your staff packet. A neighborhood meeting was held in the Louisa County Public Meeting Room on December 13th, 2023, at which no citizens attended. After the neighborhood meeting, the applicant requested to add the entirety of parcel 67-2-B and parcel 67-2-A to create the rezoning application for your consideration tonight. Over the past few days, staff has spoken with concerned individuals via phone and in person within the Ferncliff area. Individuals have expressed the following concerns to staff: water usage and water source, noise levels, hours of operation and days of operation, height of the plant, concerns about stormwater leaving the site into nearby streams, and dust. As a result of the concerns from citizens over the past few days, staff is hesitant to continue recommending approval of the proposed rezoning from C2 Growth Area Overlay District to I2 Growth Area Overlay District of parcel 67-2-C shown on the current slide to operate a concrete plant until more information is provided by the applicant's agent to address the citizen and staff concerns. Parcel 67-2-B, shown on the current slide where S&N Communication currently operates, contains an existing entrance that is proposed to be shared by the proposed concrete plant on Parcel C. Staff requests the applicant's agent provide additional information on the future uses or use that Parcel 67-2-B is planned for by the owner if rezoned from C2 Growth Area Overlay District to I2 Growth Area Overlay District. Lastly, staff no longer recommends the rezoning of parcel 67-2-A, which is currently vacant next to the Exxon gas station near the intersection of Route 250 and Route 208, as the applicant has not provided an intended use or uses for staff to consider for this parcel. Staff has informed the applicant's agent this week of the several concerns from individuals within the Ferncliff area. It is staff's recommendation to the Planning Commission that rezoning 2023-07 be deferred to the February Planning Commission meeting if information requested by staff and citizens is not provided to the commission this evening. This concludes staff's report, and the applicant's agent is ready to give a presentation for your consideration. Thank you.
All right, any questions for staff at this time? Very well, then we'll move on to hear from the applicant. Mr. Williams, as you know, you'll have 10 minutes to present to us.
Always remind me of that, Mr. Chairman. Well, buckle up, because we got a lot to talk about tonight. All right, as you all know, my name is Torrey Williams. I'm an attorney here in town, and I know that I've said this to you all before, but I say it every time so the people behind me also hear this. I wasn't born in Louisa, but I moved here when I was 1 year old, and I went to law school at undergrad and came back here to practice law because I like Louisa. So I have a vested interest in Louisa and the good growth of Louisa. What I want to talk about first is the history of the application. If you look at your packet, you will see that Essex Concrete, by me, applied for Parcel A and an entranceway over Parcel B for about 4.5 acres. And after the application, I had great communication with staff. I'll plug your staff again. Your staff's great. They do an awesome job. We've been working overdrive the last 2 days. The request was made by the county. Would I consider adding the entirety of Parcel B and not just the access sliver, because rezoning a little access sliver is not good zoning. I agree with them. It's not great zoning to be split zoning parcels intentionally. So I said, sure, with the understanding from the county that the current uses on Parcel B as a contractor's yard would not be disrupted. So we added that. And then during that conversation, it was brought up by the county, well, if you're going to do C and you're going to do B, why don't you just do A? It's owned by the same person. We can get it all as one parcel and one rezoning. Again, didn't matter to me. The owner of the property, who's not my client, but is part of the application, agreed. That's why we find ourselves here. But what I'm going to tell you right now is we don't need A. So I'm happy to take Parcel A out. What I'm also happy to tell you is I don't need all of B. I'm happy to take most of all B out and just have the access in to be able to get over, which we're going to talk about here in a second. However, I agree with staff that good zoning is not split zoning. So I propose to move forward on C and B with the elimination of Parcel A. So where is this location? It's just off the interstate there at the Ferncliff. It's within the Ferncliff growth area. What is the current zoning? The current zoning is C2, and you can see that there is A2 around it, and there is industrial zoning across the street there in the Ferncliff Business Park. The 2040 Comprehensive Plan, this is the guide. This is what the county spent lots of money, lots of time, lots of effort putting together on what we should do with the future land uses. And we acknowledge that it's mixed use. We do. Not trying to insinuate that it's zoned, or the future comp plan has it as industrial. It does not. It has it as mixed use. But what it does have is industrial use all around it, including directly behind it and the adjacent properties that it touches there below it. So let's jump into the desired use. Concrete plant. What's a concrete plant? Sounds scary. Sounds gross. Maybe, maybe not. This is a batch mix concrete plant that holds aggregate in the middle, that has a mobile plant that will sit on a permanent foundation, but the plant itself is mobile. We'll have a washout structure, and we'll then have stormwater management as you see there. There's not a lot to this. There is not a lot to this plant. What does it look like? This is a schematic that was submitted with the packet that shows the mobility of it and shows how it's set up. I want to be clear, this is not going to move around. The intention is not to move it in, move it out. It's going to be here. It's going to do its job here. It's going to live its life here. But it's purchased as a mobile plant and set up. So what were the concerns? What have we heard about? But let's pause. I am a huge proponent of listening to the community. I think it's important to be a good neighbor, as my client desires to be. It's also important to be a good listener. It should be the goal of every applicant in a rezoning or a CUP to address all, if not every concern, to the best of their ability. And sometimes you can't always do that. But you should address everyone you can, and we're going to talk about those today. Air quality. Who's against good air quality? Everyone breathes. We like to have good air quality. And dust is not a friend to anyone. I'll tell you, it's not a friend to my client. Having a lot of dust running around is not good for the equipment. It's not good for the employees. It's not good for the neighbors. So we can find common ground on this one, and I've learned a lot. And I'm going to try to continue to tell you about that over the next couple minutes. What I learned is that the concrete industry is one of the most heavily regulated industries in the Commonwealth of Virginia. Specifically, before any concrete plant is up and running, it must have an air quality permit from the Department of Environmental Quality with a plan. And then it has surprise visits and inspections from DEQ to see this happening. It also has an annual auditing and reporting process from an engineer. My client has many other locations. The engineer, the auditing, they're familiar with the regulations. They're set up for this. But more importantly, what I learned is that there is a dust collector on site. The dust collector is a giant vacuum that sucks the air particles out of the air as the trucks are loaded. Does anybody know what the technical term for the dust collector is? Because I learned yesterday. It is a dust collector. There is no technical term other than that. I was surprised to hear that. So air quality, not a problem. Storm water runoff. We're going to talk about 3 different types of water here, okay? The first is stormwater runoff. Let's hit pause. No matter what was going to happen on this site, stormwater runoff is going to be addressed, whether it's a residential use, whether it's a shopping center, whether it's a concrete plant. How do we do that? My client commissioned a wetland delineation report for the entirety of parcel C, and then the area that crosses with the driveway coming over, and this site doesn't sit on any of those wetlands. We use that data to then put together a preliminary, admittedly so, stormwater management plan with calculations, and we have designed a preliminary stormwater management basin. Preliminary is important here because I'm going to take a quick 10 seconds real quick and remind you that today we're here about zoning. We're not here about site plans. There will be a time for site plan, for DEQ, for VDOT, for all those technical reviews, for engineerings and comments. That's not where we are today because my client and other people shouldn't spend hundreds of thousands of dollars doing studies until they know if they can even use it for their proposed use. Okay? So we move on from there to wastewater. This is different. I also learned this. DEQ doesn't just look at the air quality, it looks at the water quality of a cement plant. And so every drop of water that hits any piece of equipment that is used to wash out any truck or anything else for the purpose of concrete is caught in a washdown area. It's a sediment retention basin. What happens? They take the trucks, they clean the trucks, they rinse the trucks out, they go into an impervious concrete area where the water does not seep out or leak, and the water gets recycled back into making more concrete, or the water evaporates, leaving the sediment and things into these basins to when then the basins are cleaned out and trucked off-site. So no wastewater impact on the location. Noise. This was my favorite project I worked on this week. If you knew me as a child, you would know that I'm not a mathematician. That's why I'm a lawyer, not an engineer. And so what I will tell you is that I got to work with sound attenuation formula, basically the dissipation of noise over distance. And what I can tell you is that a concrete batch plant produces 83 decibels at 50 feet away. But that sound will further dissipate, and there's a mathematical formula to do so. So you look at, this is a busy slide, so I'm going to kind of direct you. Top right, concrete batch plane, 83 decibels. A chainsaw is 85 decibels, just so you can kind of get a little reference for that, okay? So we then look at the site plan that was scaled, and the batch plant is 428.125 feet from the back property line. So if you were to stand on the back property line and there would be no trees, no buffers, no nothing, the decibel reading would be 64.35. But that's with no trees or no buffering. And it's important to note that in the bottom right-hand side, A1 and A2 districts, which is some of the agricultural land close to it, has a 65 decibel level during the daytime. So we can get there even if we clear cut this site. So the noise, I feel like we've addressed. Water usage. This has gone around a lot. And the other thing I'll tell you is, we learned about all these issues in the last 48 hours. We anticipated them, certainly. But we had a neighborhood meeting and no one came. And I'm not pointing fingers or saying, well, because no one came, no one can come talk about it. This is the process. It's supposed to work this way. But what I want you to know is that we're ready. We have these answers. We've put together these slides. We've worked diligently with the county. So back to water usage. I learned that it takes about 220 gallons to make a batch of concrete. I've learned that you also need washout. You also need to fill the side tanks of concrete mixers. And that where this plant anticipates using is about 4,000 gallons of water a day. My client will connect to the county water centralized system. Now, I'm going to go ahead and address it head on. They'd also like to have a well. They would. They're happy to connect. They're happy to rely on the water, but they would like a backup well as well. Traffic impacts. This is not a Walmart. You have employees coming. This is not a big plant. You have some employees coming. You have materials coming in. It gets mixed. It goes out on concrete mixers. So what we have is 37.88 estimated trips a day. Well, how does 0.88 trips happen? Well, that's over about a month, right? We calculate it. We break it down. That's what we have. But the traffic here also, that should be pointed out, it's a nice, very straight area with great sight distance. Already has a right turn lane ability built in there. This is the turn that goes into S&N. And that's why the entranceway is designed to go into S&N, because they already have a nice wide area of the road. They already have a turn lane built in. They already have some curb and gutter. There's no need to put another big commercial entrance that takes trucks going in and out there. So what I also want to say is, there's a road called Mallory Road, just down the road, west a little bit on 250. That's a loop road, and I had some comments and questions about, well, are you going off Mallory Road? No. There's no need to go down Mallory Road unless someone on Mallory Road orders concrete. They want to build a deck or an addition. And so I had the opportunity to meet with VDOT. I always do this ahead of time. And VDOT says, we don't have any problems with this, but of course, we have to see what the plan actually looks like when it comes through site plan. Finally, I've had some conversations about, well, Tory, if we give you an industrial use, generally I-2, it opens the gate for everyone behind you. And you're right. It absolutely does. But we're willing to proffer out a lot of uses. Almost all of them. And if you look about the uses that are left, they relate to two things: utilities and communications, and contractor yards. Why? Because the owner of the property, S&N Communications, may desire to use these properties later for their business. So this was our attempt to show you that this is not a camel's nose under the tent. How'd I do?
You did pretty well. I gave you just a little bit of leeway.
Thank you, sir.
But I think you're practicing maybe a little bit on the side to get this under 10, so thank you for that.
Trying my best, Mr. Chairman.
All right, so I'd like to hold the questions for the applicant right now and go ahead and hear from the public. And then, Mr. Williams, you will be allowed 5 minutes at the end to discuss anything that came up. So I have a set of cards here. We're going to step through the cards on this first, and then anyone who didn't sign up by card will get them after that. So first up is Edwin Bailey, and I see I have 2 cards for him. So Edwin Bailey will be first, and Roxanne Bailey will be next.
Thank you, Tori. That was very helpful. I'm Ed Bailey. As you know, we have the farm immediately adjacent to this parcel, 450 feet away, where the concrete plant will be located. Recognize right up front that the zoning that we're talking about here, going from C2 to I2, is a radical departure from a comprehensive plan. Only I1, light industry is permitted in the mixed use in this area for the plant. And there's already been expressed today, I think by you, Tori, that there is nada, I2 zoning within 5 miles of the Ferncliff intersection. It's way over there by Zion Crossroads. So it's big move off of your plan and the reality for this area. Second, just, Tori didn't mention it, but this, of course, will be right across the street from the beautiful 103-acre Ferncliff Business Park, not the industrial part, the business park, where Amazon is located, bringing in 400 employees. Consider the dust implications of this. Got to get it right. You don't want to deal with Amazon coming to you and saying, what the heck you guys doing? You've got bigger issues with Amazon in this county, a lot of billions of dollars. You don't want to anger them by setting up something across the street that's going to create a problem for them. The other thing that's not mentioned here is that this zoning to I2, and now I understand you're withdrawing the A parcel, but you're right across the street, nonetheless, from the cemetery of the Galilee Baptist Church. It's the biggest church in the area. I can't imagine that you would zone I2 across the street from a cemetery of a community that's been there for years, let alone the church. It's just unthinkable to me. In any event, I think you have to understand that if you go I2 here, there's no turning back. It's over with. The 2040 comprehensive plan for this area, mixed use, all that careful thinking and planning you've done, out the window. Other people will be watching you, as I mentioned earlier today. You've got this gray area. How you react to this sort of an application is going to very much affect any light industry coming into the area and say, whoa, what are we going to have next door if we're going to allow this sort of thing to happen?
Thank you, Mr. Bailey.
Okay,
Time is
appreciate
up.
it.
Yes. Next up, I may have gotten it right. Royanne Bailey, or?
I would say that.
Yes, please come forward. We have to come forward. We have to get this recorded.
The speakers who submitted a card is a citizen of Louisa County. Would you like to hear from her first? I thought that.
Well, no, go ahead and speak.
Okay.
Go ahead and speak. There's time.
Okay. The federal EPA has established that concrete manufacturing is among the worst sources of industrial pollution. Mr. Williams has talked about dust control, so I won't belabor that. But we do have a large number of employees across the street at the business park, only to grow larger by several hundreds shortly. If you've ever visited a concrete batching plant, you remember what your shoes looked like after you walked around, or the slurry that your car tires brought home with as a souvenir. You don't want such a plant near your home or your farm, especially when your children and grandchildren play. Noise travels far in the country. The application doesn't mention noise from the batching and conveying and loading processes. I'm addressing the application because that's what we had to review. I'm editing as I go to not be redundant. Ms. Shallowell, who I mentioned, will address the aquifer issue, so I'll defer on that. Compliance with the Federal Clean Water Act is also a special concern with the Essex concrete plant parcel. This site plan shows a large wastewater pond adjacent to Venable Creek, which runs almost the full length of parcel C. Venable Creek flooded very badly yesterday, and I noticed that the containment facility has an open top. I suspect they would have joined streams yesterday. On May 10th, 2021, the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers issued a report finding that Venable Creek is protected under the Act as a perennial tributary of the James River. This finding was based on the Corps' examination of the adjacent 67-2D immediately west of these three parcels for the ill-starred Ferncliff Place project. This leaves unanswered whether the plant could even be built without harming the water table. Finally, the application declines to discuss substantively why cement batching operations would not be material detrimental to the adjacent property or the surrounding community. Allied Concrete's plant is only 6 miles away west, and Essex has a plant 34 miles east. A vague, quote, need for competition argument do not justify a major rezoning such as this. The proposed rezoning, I'm back on the other subject, is not in the public interest. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Bailey. Next up is Heidi Shalloway.
Hi, my name is Heidi Shalloway. I live with my husband at 1980 Mallory Road, which is the second property west of the 67-2C parcel. From our property, we can see that parcel and hear any loud sounds and vibrations. I oppose rezoning the three parcels located in the Ferncliff growth area, medium to heavy industry such as the proposed concrete batching plant would significantly affect the church across the street, as well as numerous nearby residences and farmers. The rezoning application includes no discussion of air quality, noise, dust, water pollution, or aquifer drawdown. This omission makes it impossible for you to evaluate the impact or of approval of this application on the community until late in the process. The cement industry is the third largest source of industrial air pollution. Concrete batching plants emit particulate matter, nitrogen oxides, lead, formaldehyde, sulfur dioxide, carbon dioxide, and volatile organic compounds, which raise the risk of cardiovascular and respiratory diseases, especially in children, pregnant women, the elderly, and those already with respiratory diseases. Homes miles away will be affected. Particulate matter can remain in the air for a long time and travel great distances. Exposure to cement dust can irritate eyes, nose, throat, and the upper respiratory system and lead to lung injuries, including silicosis and lung cancer. Attempts to water down the dust creates an ugly, muddy slurry that tracks all over the community. These plants consume large amounts of water and generate waste that can contribute to water pollution, which can harm aquatic life and contaminate drinking water. For instance, batching 700 yards of concrete would require more than 20,000 gallons of water today. Mr. Williams smartly did not mention how many yards per batch. In communities where industry uses excessive amounts of groundwater, homeowners have woken up to dry wells. What can you do to prevent this from happening? Concrete batching plants are very noisy. Exposure to high noise level increases the risk of ischemic heart disease, hypertension, sleep disturbances, cognitive impairments in children, hearing loss, and mental instability. As this plant is built, we will actively monitor the decibels when they exceed 65 decibels daytime or 55 at night on our agricultural land as per the County Code of Ordinances. We will call the sheriff to have them shut down the plant. Since these plants produce from 63.3 to 83 decibels, we expect to call often, causing an excessive drain on the sheriff department's resources, which may require additional funding to hire more personnel. By rezoning to I-2, any toxic industry can set up on that land. You lose control. How many of you would want to live next to a concrete batching plant, exposing yourself to heart and lung diseases, contaminated or depleted groundwater, and the constant bang, bang, banging and vibrations shaking your home. No hands, Mr. Williams? Would you like to live next door to it? I'll sell you my property. You can live right next door. I guess that answers my question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Shalloway. Would anyone else like to speak on this subject tonight? Very well, then, as is custom and requirement of the bylaws, the applicant has 5 minutes to address anything they've heard during the public comment period.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Tom. You're good.
All right, we're good.
All right, thank you, sir. Can I get back to my slide, please?
Yeah.
All right. I had the great privilege and opportunity to speak with Mr. and Miss Bailey on the phone for about 50 minutes about 2 days ago. That was probably an hour after Tom let me know that they had called the office and they had a meeting the next day. It was very, very soon as soon as I knew the Baileys owned the property. There you are, Mr. Bailey. Did you own the property? And that you had some questions and concerns. I offered to meet with them, and I'm still willing to meet with them and continue to talk through this process. I spent the 50 minutes taking notes and listening, not talking, because I wanted to address their problems. I think we did a pretty good job of addressing their problems, because I think when Miss Bailey gave her speech, there were some of the things that she was ready to discuss that we'd addressed. To be fair to her, she didn't know the answers before she walked in here today. And I get that. I understand that. That's how the process works. Listening, addressing. We had 48 hours to hear them, and I feel like we've addressed them in those 48 hours. But just to briefly go over a couple of the things. The Bailey's home, or maybe not their home, but the house on their property, from my estimation, is about 878 feet from the proposed batch plant. That is 450 feet from their structure to the property line, and then we have that 427, 428 feet there as well. Galilee Baptist Church was brought up several times. It's important to note that we sent Galilee Baptist Church a notice, and the county also notified them of these processes. And we had a representative from Essex Concrete, Mr. Dervin Corker here, meet with a representative from Galilee Baptist this morning and hear their concerns. And certainly I am not authorized to speak on behalf of Galilee Baptist Church. But I think there's a reason they're not here today. Because I think if they were upset and they really didn't want this, they'd be here. But we took the steps to reach out to them and meet with them and hear their concerns, explain the situation. And not to speak out of turn, but we were told we understand what you're doing and we're okay with it. From there, let's talk about the comp plan. The comp plan is a guide. It's not perfect. It's not meant to be, this is exactly what we're going to do. It's a guide for the next 20 years of the county. So what does that mean? It means sometimes we move a line here or there. And what this plan does is it has a piece of property that is slated to be mixed use, but it's right adjacent and in the right area for industrial use, what the county has said in 2040. And Mr. Bailey makes a good point, and it's the point that I would make if I were Mr. Bailey. Careful what you wish for. You make this I-2, you're going to have I-2 everywhere. Well, not necessarily. And that's because we're proffering out all the heavy uses. Again, this is not a camel's nose under the tent scenario. Certainly, there are creeks and tributaries. The Army Corps of Engineers study cited by the Baileys is on the adjacent property. It's not this property. It's the parcel D, the 15 acres western of this property. I'm not saying that there are no creeks or wetlands on parcel C. There are. And they're identified and delineated in the study that was done by our engineer, Koontz, Bryant, Johnson, and Williams. But my point to you is that all of this was taken into consideration as to whether this use could go here and where on the site it could go. And I'll pause again to say, this is about use. DEQ, VDOT, the county, they will all have to review a site plan. There will have to be calculations for stormwater runoff to make sure that any retention ponds are adequate in size and scale to retain any runoff. Our engineers have said we have the space and availability to do so. We believe that if given the opportunity to proceed with this project, the county will agree once review is made. So with that being said, we believe that we've addressed all the questions presented thus far. And we stand ready to continue to address any questions that we can answer thus far. I think something that wasn't brought up, but probably should have been, was height. 60 feet is the height for I-2. We intend to abide by the height of I-2. And I'm done with that. I'll be happy to answer any hours of operation questions should I be asked. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Williams. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to close the public comment period, and we'll address questions afterwards. So, public comment period is closed. I'll bring it back to the commission for any questions.
Mr. Chairman,
Mr. Brooks.
I got a question for staff, Mr. Eglin.
I'm sorry. Do you need me for staff? I'm sorry.
This is in a growth area overlay district, and I see we have no proffers or anything. Is that because this is also the restrictions, landscape buffers that exist in growth overlay districts? Is
So-
that under that section?
I think it's a two-part question. So this is in the Ferncliff Growth Area Overlay District designated mixed use, which means it would be pursuant to 86-123 through 125, which is the code section for improved and enhanced architectural and landscaping standards, such as islands, shrubs, trees, 360-degree architecture, and things of that nature. The other part about the proffers is the proffers that we're seeing tonight are the first time that staff has seen the proffers. So whether this application goes forward tonight or not, staff would request that the applicant do two things. One, in writing, request parcel A to be removed, and then two, provide with the county proffer template a signed proffer by the property owner with the listed proffers from the code section for I-2 within the growth area overlay district.
Okay.
I hope that answers your question.
More than I have, but that's good. But to follow up on that, the requirements, that includes the buffers, the 100-foot buffer that's in the overlay district is required in this situation.
So,
correct. And let me follow up on that.
Sure.
And if that is the case, parcel B that's going to be rezoned or being requested to be rezoned, does the existing features comply with the new restrictions they're going to be under, with this, what I'm hearing this application is? Or do they need to comply since they're existing?
great, another two-part question. So for parcel C, where the concrete plant is proposing to be, actually really both of them, the growth area overlay standards actually shrink the setback requirements, which not to be confused with vegetated buffer. So the setback requirements typically for Route 250 are 100 feet. But when you're in a growth area designated mixed use or industrial, it's only a 50-foot setback, which I believe was shown on the concept plan. Let's see if I can grab this real quick. Let's try the other direction. Okay. Now, there is, when it comes to buffer requirements in the growth area overlay district, there isn't a width requirement and there isn't a percentage requirement other than the fact that you take the total development area and you divide it by 2,500 square feet and you get the number of trees. And then there's another multiplier for bushes. So when it comes to growth area standards for landscaping, think of it as a calculation for the number of trees and shrubs, and then staff works with the applicant on where the best place to locate those are, which typically would be up front. And this particular concept that we've seen, although it be an initial concept, they're showing that they're going to have an existing vegetative buffer to remain pretty much from the edge of Route 250 down to where the parking is going to be. The county staff has not received, because it is a rezoning, we cannot place a condition like we normally do with a conditional use permit to state that that existing vegetation remain. The applicant could voluntarily proffer that the vegetative area that they're showing in the concept plan does remain, which would probably be above and beyond what's required by the growth area standards. That was question one, I think, before I go to part two. Do you have any?
Okay, I'm good.
Part two is the SNN the SNN communications parcel, which is parcel B, that's currently in existence. If that property was to do an addition, then that addition would have to abide with the 360-degree architectural standards. And they would have to, let's say it's a 2,500 square foot addition, you would take that calculator with the tree and bush calculator in 86-123 through 124, and we would determine the number of trees and bushes required by the expansion. But the existing building would not be forced into having to apply the entire facade to the new standards unless they tore it all down and rebuilt it.
Okay. And one follow-up, Mr. Chairman. And that said, about the buffers, this lease parcel, I'm gonna call it parcel C. If buffers were an issue and concerned about the buffering, if they elected to, they could proffer a condition not to disturb anything beyond the lease area. Is that correct?
A voluntary proffer could be really
Voluntary
anything.
proffer,
If the applicant or the applicant's agent wanted to voluntarily proffer a buffer of a certain dimension or depth or composition, they could do so. It could be provided in writing for staff to evaluate and for the Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors to make a decision on.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Eglin.
Thank you.
Chairman.
Go ahead.
Thank you. Tom, if I recall correctly, when you gave your initial presentation, you said that you were not comfortable making a recommendation at this time. Is that correct?
That is correct.
What, and I guess this is kind of directed in two directions here. What are the odds that if we defer this for a month, you all can work out and get us all the information that we need so that you can make a recommendation?
Well,
That's, like I said, it goes two ways. That's the applicant as well as staff.
If the Planning Commission was to recommend a deferral this evening, I think it would be very important for staff to identify from the Planning Commission what items the Planning Commission may feel may not be fully answered or they want additional answers. But I also would recommend that if there's further questions, to perhaps ask the applicant if they could elaborate on some of the things they may not have touched on in the presentation. As from a staff perspective, again, we're looking at the proffer for the first time tonight. It's possible that if we took a short recess, we could take a look at that and examine to determine if we could feel more comfortable with recommending approval based on the additional information. I'd have to confer with the director of the Community Development Department to see if we could finalize our recommendation tonight based off what we've seen.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Quarles?
I don't know where that leaves us,
I
but.
don't know yet, but Mr. Quarles.
Couple questions. This daily usage of water, and this is something that I hear a number of 4,000. To me, it seems light, but I'm not in the concrete business. And then I hear numbers that were provided by one of the people speaking that yielded something to the nature of 20,000. I guess my question is to the actual applicant. Do we use a totalizer system, a water totalizer that calculates the amount of gallons per day or per month or whatever your per hour? Do we have something to calculate? I know that in other industries they have a meter that is hooked to the water source, and it shows what that looks like. We call it a totalizer. Sure.
I thought I knew the answer, Mr. Quarles, but you don't want to know that I think I know the answer. You want the answer. That's why I speak to the representative from Essex Concrete. The concrete mixing process is a precise process in that the weight and thickness of it has to be on point.
I understand.
Yes, sir. So there is a meter system that goes into play when they're mixing the concrete to put on the trucks. From there, each truck holds about 50 gallons on a side tank that's used to loosen it up if it evaporates too much on the way, or clean out the chutes and those types of things. So the number I gave you was based on the amount of water anticipated to be used for clean out, for mixing of the anticipated number of batches that would be made at this plant per day, and that's how the calculation was done. Now, where did I get that number? I relied on my client and their experience at their other plants to give me that number.
I understand
Yes,
that.
maybe I misunderstood your question, then, Mr. Quarles.
I get that point. I know that the PSIs and everything have to do with exact amounts of water. I get that. But
Yes, sir.
there's also the fact that we're doing washing off vehicles.
Sure.
Cleaning equipment and so forth. That water has to go into that daily total.
It does.
So that's where I'm wondering whether there's a meter system that tells us, okay, this is definitely what we used.
Sure.
Because that could be, it could be as much as what you're saying you're using for mixing concrete. I don't know.
Sure.
I can't speak to that. I was wanting something more definitive as an answer with that.
Yes, sir. So on this slide, these were numbers that I got from my client for 220 gallons per batch, 15 batches a day. And then by the time you calculate the 50 gallons on the 6 trucks and then the extra cleanup water was 700 gallons. That's how that was derived and the calculation was made. I don't know that I have any definitive proof for you that they meter and look at that water every day. The other thing to consider and to keep in mind is that water is recycled from the washout bins as well from time to time. So that might not answer your question directly. I think the answer to your question is when it comes to the water to put into the concrete, yes, that's measured and calculated. When it comes to the water used for washing and cleaning trucks and those things, probably not. If they were to hook to the Louisa County water system, I assume there'd be certainly a meter on that to help nail us down.
That's my next point.
Yes, sir.
My next point is if you hook to the Louisa water system, we would know exactly what you're using.
That's correct.
And I also heard your comments that your client was requesting a well as well as a backup. I tend to lean against that because then we don't know what water you're using, whether it's coming from the aquifer of the ground or whether it's coming from the system that is provided by Louisa County. And I don't know whether you'd be willing to proffer that out, forego the well. Certainly that would make the system a little more, the situation a little more comfortable. You also talked about dry residue being trucked off-site.
Yes.
Where?
There are locations that take those types of residue. My point is this. When you have a washout bin, and it's a sediment retention bin that's impervious, the idea is that it's not like we scoop it out and just throw it in a pile or spread it on the ground. It's taken off site, because again, if you think about it, we have the air recapture system known as the dust collector, right? Mm-hmm. That collects it out of the air. It would do no good if we then just had it all over the ground when we washed out trucks. So it is again, the water's pumped out or evaporated, and then once the sediment pool is to the point where it needs cleaning, it's then removed from the site and taken to a site that can receive that type of byproduct.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to hold off for a second.
All right.
Go ahead.
Mr. Williams, I have a few questions, if you don't mind.
Yes, Mr. Chairman.
To begin with, talking about the regulations that were applied to this plant, are there different regulations for mobile plants versus permanent plants?
Not
Do
to my
the same
knowledge.
regulations apply, or
My knowledge is it's the same. If it's a concrete plant, it's a concrete plant. My understanding,
is your knowledge complete on this? Or do
Maybe
you
not.
need to- Or do
Maybe
you
not.
need to talk to your representative?
I'll be happy to talk to my representative.
I just want to make sure we know that.
Sure.
Want to know whether there's a.
The same.
Very good. All right, good. So, is this site going to be a gravel site, or is it going to be paved entirely?
Gravel.
Gravel. So what do you all,
With concrete areas where the foundation sits for the batch area.
understand? So
Yes.
what do you do about dust from all the trucks moving around?
So I talked to my client about that, and I want to differentiate between different kinds of dust.
Certainly.
Okay? There is,
Certainly.
and that's a funny thing to say.
No,
But
that's
sometimes
fair.
we find ourselves in funny positions with funny facts, right? Gravel, dust, and dirt is just that. Gravel, dust, and dirt. It's not harmful, it's no problem. There's probably some out here in this parking lot that the county owns. And in those situations, in speaking with Essex Concrete on our conference call yesterday that we had for about an hour, addressing these issues and gathering this information that I knew the commission would like to have, is that again, dust is not a friend of equipment. It's not a friend of things that move. So they do things to keep the dust down on the yard, such as watering the yard from time to time. But again, I don't want to have any confusion that they're watering anything of the materials that are used for the concrete. They're not.
I understand that, Having worked on construction sites before, I understand the water trucks going around too, and I also understand you can water the yard, but you can still, it dries out in the summertime. I mean, you gotta spend a lot of time riding around watering the yard. So where do you get your water for your water trucks? Because it takes a lot of water to water the yard
It does.
in the summer.
It does.
Where does that water come from?
I would assume that it would come from either the Louisa County Water Authority or the well.
So that's in excess of the 4,000 gallons a day.
I think you're probably right. I think you are correct in that.
Can we get an idea of how many gallons a day that is to water a yard?
If you give me a second, I can try to get that answer for you. I'll also tell
Sure.
you that there was something else that was brought up yesterday as a mechanism for how they keep dust down, and I'll be happy to see if I can remember that as well.
Certainly.
I'm thinking that we give the necessary break that we allowed, that we talked about. Here's the thing. We've seen what's happened. Given the opportunity to work it out, what's that? If they can't work it out, then we turn it down. Because that's just that process. And if you feel like, if the idea of the commission is to defer, but let's give it that.
Yes.
So, I stand corrected. The yard is paved in the high-traffic areas, and the other portion, just in the high-traffic, the whole yard will not be paved. It will not. I'm not gonna sit here and tell you that it will be. In fact, I think our site plan talks about some gravel areas. But the high-traffic areas where the trucks come in and where they receive and where they go out are paved. Furthermore, I was reminded that the very nature of a concrete plant that has 5 or 6 trucks, and this goes to my hours of operation comment that I ran out of time when we were discussing earlier, is that this plant runs for an hour to an hour and a half to load the trucks. The trucks leave, there's no activity on the yard or very little activity on the yard while the trucks are out. Then the trucks come back in and they do a batch and they send it back out with very little activity. So I want to make sure that we not understand, because I know that you understand it's the wrong word, but that we remind everyone that's listening that this is not a yard per se where it's constant motion and constant traffic. This is a yard that has 5 concrete mixers, 1 loader that lives there, and then you receive material in the yard. And I think, too far. That is illustrated. In fact, I was surprised about the estimated trips per day to be only about 37.88. There's not a lot of traffic in and out. So I understand that certainly if this was a racetrack and there was something constantly moving on there, a lot of dust would be produced. But in this situation, it's not a high trafficked yard in the sense that something is moving on it every minute of every day while it's open.
So how many days a week is this plan to be in operation?
The normal business hours will be Monday through Friday. I specifically asked the question about weekends. They very rarely open on a weekend. It's because they charge the person who's getting the concrete a plant opening fee if you want to get something on a Saturday. And in speaking with the applicant, or not the applicant, but the representative from Essex Concrete, they can't remember a time it's ever been open on a Sunday.
How about a Saturday?
Oh, it's been open on a Saturday, for sure.
Oh.
It's few and far between. Because again, usually in that situation, it's a big job with a big pour that needs on-demand trucks. And in that situation, that's 15 batches a day. Keep that in mind. This plant will produce 15 batches a day because they only have 5 trucks here. And if you do a batch at 6:30, your batch doesn't come in and go back out again until 9:30 or 10. Your batch doesn't come in and go back out till 1 o'clock. And you're not sending many batches out past probably the 2:33 area because someone has to do something with that concrete once it leaves the plant.
No, I'm just thinking about some very large construction projects that are coming up in our future in the next 10 years that
Sure.
everyone's
And-
made a fuss about, which may require much concrete. And
That's a very fair point, Mr. Chairman.
Yes.
I mean, I think, it's important to be intellectually honest, okay? And so what's going to happen every day? I think I can tell you with good faith about what that looks like. Will there be a time when the plant has to be open a little later or a little earlier or run a little more? Maybe so.
Let me look over my list here. All right. I think that takes care of me.
Thank you, Mr.
Were there-
Chairman.
Anyone else have questions?
I do.
I have a few as well.
Okay. Go ahead, Mr. Quarles.
Okay, so, getting back to, the water and it's, the water that's being provided. We talked about the well that you're requesting, but you indicated maybe there could be a proffer that could go away.
What I will tell you is that I have the authority from my client to proffer that they will hook to the water once it passes the site, and that was our 48-hour ago answer. My answer
Water
right now, about an hour ago,
Is at the
person
site.
emails that there's a water line past the site.
Right.
And that was news to me and my client. I knew that there was a line. I didn't know there was an operable water line in front of the site.
So there being a water line at the site, you're saying now that we can strike that additional well?
What I'm saying is I don't have the authority to say that we will not drill a well on the property. I have the authority to say that we will hook to the water.
Okay, so that's an open, that's an open situation. You can't definitively do that until you speak to.
I have to have authority from the client.
So, that kind of puts that at a stall. You mentioned earlier about a possible recess to talk to staff, and what do you think that would accomplish at this point?
Mr. Eglin mentioned that we could have a recess to talk about putting together proffers, and I'm happy to do that. Because I think that my conversation with staff last week is much different than the conversation I had with staff over the last 2 days. And so,
And I understand that, Tory.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Wood, I get that, but I gotta be honest with you, with this open well situation, I can't give you an approval.
well, what I'm happy to receive from you, Mr. Quarles, if the commission would consider is that I'm happy to take a brief recess to work with staff. I don't think there are but so many proffers that we really need to discuss per se. Because, for example, the vegetative buffer, I'm trying to get to my slide. We've already committed to that. In fact, it's hard to see. I don't know if there's a laser or not. But this little thing right here that's hard to see, it says existing vegetative buffer to remain. We've already talked about that. We're okay with leaving. So if it's a vegetative buffer issue, check, we're good on that. If it's hooking to the county water source, when it becomes available, if it's available now, check, no problem on that. If it's about the uses, I talked to the owner of the land, because remember, tricky situation, we're a leasehold, right? Go back to law school. Bundle of sticks, right? So what can a leasehold do? They can use and operate the property pursuant to their lease. What they can't do, they can't sell it, they can't mortgage it, they can't make proffers that are binding without talking to the owner, right? So, I've already talked to the owner about the things that we needed to address coming into tonight. That's why I was able to present to the commission a list of uses that we were able to strike off by two. Because I talked to the owner and the managing member of the LLC and went through them line by line. What's your intention? What do you want to do in the future? This doesn't foreclose you from doing something in the future, but it does require you to come back to the board to get that approval should you want to do something on the list that we're taking off. So uses, connecting to water, vegetative buffer, I mean, I think it would be duplicitous to say that we have to follow all DEQ regulations for air and water because we have to do it anyway. But if you wanted to say that, we could put that in there. I think that'd be a very quick proffer list to come up with.
One additional thing.
Yes, sir.
Can you speak to the reason why this is a mobile plant as opposed to, I mean, because is this something that's gonna roll in, do a little bit and then turn into something else? Because the question I'm asking is because you're asking for a rezoning.
Sure.
So-
Can I make sure that I know the answer to that before I answer it?
Sure.
Thank you.
It has all the earmarks, all the earmarks of a temporary operation. It's leased, it's
Right. Yes.
I have the answer, and this is what I thought it was. One, it's cost. It's much cheaper to buy this type of plant and have it set up. It's also much quicker. It's much quicker to have this plant built and shipped here and set up and get into operation. The third is that this is the way the industry is heading. The industry is moving away from large steel and beams and things that are more permanent. This is just the industry trend. So there's nothing nefarious about our intention here. It's just this is how concrete batch plants are set up. And again, I think that we can, in good faith, let you know that this is our true intention, again, because we've struck all the other, what I would say, heavy or uses that may negatively impact. Again, if you look at that list, what we're really looking at is a construction yard, anything to do with utilities, because that's what S&N Contractors does. They're a utility contractor, and then this concrete plant.
One other thing, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Corliss.
I would like at this point to have the lady from the Water Authority.
Sure.
Pam Allman talk to us about the consumption that we're hearing about that's needed for this water and what the availability and then its impact.
So we have been in the process over the last couple of years bringing 2 additional wells online at Spring Creek, Green Springs area. And that'll add an additional 204,800 gallons of capacity per day, bringing it to about 880,000 gallons a day. We've sold to date about 41% of the capacity we currently have. When we add the new capacity in, that'll drop that down to about 31% of the capacity. So we still have capacity in the well system to support this project.
And I understand that the water is at this location now for them to be.
Yes, the water line runs across their property.
Next question. Let's say we missed the consumption and we said, okay, well, it's 20 gallon per day. How does that impact what we already have there? And is
We
that
have
gonna
a
be problem?
system that an engineer is going to probably design this, and they will tell us what size meter they need to fit into the to the project. If they use beyond their purchase capacity with the meter, then we have the ability to upsize their meter to the next size. So they're
Okay.
paying for the right amount of capacity.
But given the fact the source of, the source of water, it's not detriment to what we have flowing?
I don't believe so, no.
Okay, okay. From what you heard here tonight, do you see any issues with water, sewer, anything like that?
Sewers on the adjacent property at the pump station, there are no sewer lines that would connect this property yet. That would have to be designed by an engineer or deferred for connection until the lines are run.
Okay, all right. Anybody have any questions for her while she's up there?
Apparently not.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm,
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
No, Mr. Dickerson.
I appreciate Commissioner Quarles' questions about the well, because I too am concerned about when and what use that water will come from those wells. That could be a sticking point here, just to let you know.
Yes, sir, we understand.
What are the hours of operation? We've kind of danced around
Thank
that
you
a
for
whole
asking the
lot,
question.
and I'd really like to hear a definitive answer on hours of operation.
So I wrote them down, hold on one second. The anticipated hours of operation would be 6 a.m. to 6:30 until around 4 to 4:30. And
So
that is in line with what Allied does.
So that's going to be a proffer, or that's anticipated hours of operation?
That's anticipated hours of operation. That is 99% of the time.
All right. Talk to me about lighting at the facility.
All dark sky lighting would be proffered and required.
Now, the residue that you were talking about transporting off-site, would that be off-site to a site in Louisa County or off-site to a site outside of Louisa County?
That's a great question, of which I do not know the answer to. I know that it would have to be a site that would be in a position to be able to receive that type of waste.
Is that something you can work on for us?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
If you give me a minute, I can probably get you the
All right.
answer.
That'd be great.
Thank you.
Hang on. We got a lot of work to do. Good. Questions before we go to the break, so we don't have to go to the break 5 different times.
Because a lot of their things, a lot of solar projects, when they're decontaminated, they have to be going outside the county. They can't go inside the wind field, they can't go outside. Gotcha. So, yeah, and you just want to lose the lowest thing.
It's just, that's where I am.
You kids, yeah. Yeah. As long as it's not in the county.
I just breathe loud.
Right?
In 5 years here, we've ever done one that the staff said.
Yeah.
We're not comfortable making a recommendation, and we went ahead and moved on it.
I have an answer for you, sir.
Great.
So, what I can tell you is that Essex has had site contractors who will receive it on certain sites where it's appropriate to be used on their sites. So this is not a large amount of sediment that is disposed of. This is not something that happens very often. And what I've also learned is depending on the quality of the sediment, that it can actually be reused and repurposed into the concrete, much like the water can as well, once it dries. So the third party, if you will, that will receive sediment that's deemed not to the quality to be reused into the concrete is generally a site contractor on a site where it's appropriate to be used.
But we don't know where that site is.
No, sir.
Thank you.
I don't think there is a site, to be fair. I think it is a site that is appropriate, like a construction site or somewhere where they need fill or they need something, and it's an area that's appropriate for it to be used on a large-scale commercial project, would be my guess.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So,
All right. Are there any other questions? Then I would propose that it's 8:47 right now. Let's take a recess. I'll give you until 9:05.
Very generous, so I think we can do that.
All right. 9:05, and we'll hear back whether or not you all have determined what you need to determine.
Thanks, sir.
So we'll go in recess now.
Thank you.
I guess I'll be asking Mr. Eglin probably to give us an update on what has happened. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chairman, would it be possible for us to also see this document since we're part of the community?
Put it on the screen
right now. Yes.
Chairman, members of the Planning Commission, thank you for the recess to work with the applicant. We have used, in the time given, the draft proffer template that you've seen for many years for both parcel 67-2-C and 67-2-B, with C being used for the concrete plant and B being used for access and the current location of SNN Communications. Working with the applicant, excuse some issues. I'll grab the keyboard here. As you see on the screen, we have come up with a short list of conditions based off what was brought up in conversations this evening, and staff is looking for any comment from the Planning Commission or concerns about what is drafted and seen on the screen.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Goodwin.
I have one thing that I am uncomfortable with. It has to do with hours of operation. I'm not comfortable with saying the anticipated hours of operation are, because I can see, to go to the extreme, well, we just went 24/7, and we didn't anticipate that. We usually say the hours of operation will be, and we don't use words like anticipated because they are indefinite terms.
I would suggest that the applicant or the agent for the applicant speak on whether or not they would like to nail down specific days and times for the use of at least parcel C, where the concrete plant will be. So, is the applicant or the owner, are you willing to nail down like Monday through Friday with specific dates and time, or is the nature of the business is that not possible?
The nature of the business, that's not possible. So we can't do a proffer with hours of operation at this time. Happy to review the proffers that we've agreed to. With specific attention to number 5. So this is, I wouldn't call this a split the baby. I think it fixes the issue without handicapping someone in the future. So the idea here is that the concrete plant will only be operated on the area shown on the concept plan. The concept plan is specifically referenced and dated, and it says that the uses shown on the concept plan attached and shown by Exhibit A shall be solely served by the Louisa County Water Authority or successor thereof, but I can't lock down the owner for the other property. Like, for example, very well may be that the owner of the residual property where the office is in the front will want to attach. I'm sorry, Tom, thank you. May want to connect to water, but I don't have the authority to proffer that any and every use on that property has to be on county water. There may be an existing well already for that front building that's being used. I don't know. But what I am willing to say is that I did attain the authority from Essex Concrete to say that they don't need a well. Essex Concrete does not need a well, and they'll be happy to attach and only use water from the county. Yes, Mr.
Respectfully, Mr. Williams, that the owner of the property is not giving you permission, but he's the owner of the property. So he's got a business there. Essex has a business there. He digs a well. You know, that doesn't work. It doesn't work because
I'm sorry, Mr. Corso.
they're utilizing the same property.
They are. And that's the very issue and kind of the quagmire that we found ourselves in when Essex Concrete wants 4 acres and an access.
Yeah.
But the county wants us to do 29 full acres because it also includes parcel B. So any proffers that I agree to are also going to impact parcel B, where there's already an existing construction office and yard that's there, and there's already a building, albeit in dilapidated repair, on parcel C. So what I'm willing to do is to say that Essex Concrete will only use water from the county. Essex Concrete will not use water from a well, period.
I just don't think that that's, for lack of a better word, policeable.
I understand.
If we have two businesses operating, and I say, well, you know, here, George, you take a glass of water, but that's, you know, it's from me, but, you know, that's too vague.
I understand your concerns. I respectfully disagree, but I understand the concerns.
Mr. Williams?
Yes.
Just a question that was kind of brought up in passing, that wasn't really a question, but it did spark my interest in this. Just to clarify, because I assume we're going to have employees on site all day during business operations. There's no provision for sewage, or septic, or is there going to be septic or anything like that?
On the site plan, there's a batch office. It's small.
Yes.
And there is a restroom in the batch office.
I understand. I'm trying to figure out where it goes. Is there going to be a septic field on the site?
There will be.
Oh, all
but,
right.
but a very limited, very private, very small septic field that has one office bathroom in it.
Well, I understand that. I just wanted to clarify that because it wasn't clear to me that, that from the discussion earlier, that was considered. So
Yes,
thank
sir.
you. Okay. Any other
Thank you.
questions?
Mr. Chair,
Mr. Goodwin?
does this result in staff being in a position to make a recommendation?
Mr. Eglin?
Staff's current recommendation is denial.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Any further questions? All right, then, Mr. Quarles, if I read this correctly, I believe this is your district.
Thank you, John. Based on the information that has been put before us, with the REZ 2023-07 Essex Concrete Plant, I'm going to recommend from the information that was given, I'm going to recommend denial.
We have a motion and a second to deny rezoning 2023-07 Essex Concrete Corporation. Any further comments, discussion? Ms. Johnson, would you do a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Brooks?
Yes.
Mr. Weaver?
Yes.
Mr. Jistisway?
Yes.
Mr. Kersey?
Yes.
Mr. Quarles?
Yes.
Mr. Goodwin?
Yes.
Mr. Dickerson?
Yes.
Motion carries. The rezoning request is, the recommendation to the board is to deny rezoning request REZ 2023-07 Essex Concrete. All right, and we'll move on to, since we've deferred item 2, we'll move on to item 3, which is CPA 2024-01 to add public facilities section to the adopted comprehensive plan. Mr. Coons. All right, folks, we're still having a meeting here, folks. If you could carry that out into the hall, we'd appreciate it. Thank you.
I'll wait.
It's okay.
When they say, I want my hours of operation to be weekends, just say,
Nobody's going to get him that with a church across the street.
Yeah.
Put badge on him.
You said two.
A long handle of the law.
Deputy Chris.
No, that's,
He's got one, look at his lapel.
He's got the presence.
that's Matt Dillon there.
I do too.
Chris, it's all love, buddy. It's all love. Ms. Howard.
Mr. Coombs, please.
All right, yeah, there, it's fine. So this is what we discussed last time. This is what the comprehensive plan group worked on, Mr. Goodwin, Mr. Dickerson, Supervisor Barlow, as well as Supervisor Williams. The public facilities chapter is what we discussed at the last work session. The only items that I did have updated, we removed the water authority section from the public facilities. We're working on that. We got some information, spoke with Pam tonight again. We're gonna get a little bit more information to hopefully add that here in the near future. The other item we did have is now Supervisor Woodward had requested the business calls for service about differentiation if it's actual businesses. I did go through and found that that did include schools. So we do have all the elementary schools, middle school, and high school. So one thing that I do need to change, and I would request it if you guys move to approve, is that the amendment B, that I take the calls that go to Louisa County Sheriff's Office and any of the public schools and account that towards residential calls, because based on all the other information we've been going off of, those locations would see an increase in calls for service if we saw an increase in residents. That's all the updates I have, and I stand ready to answer any questions.
Let's see. All right, so this one's a little different because, well, we'll go ahead with it. So any questions for Mr. Coons at this time? Very well, then I'm going to open the public comment period on this. Public comment period is open. Is there anyone in the room that would like to come forward and address the Planning Commission on this item?
On the doorstep.
Seeing none, and since this is brought by the county, so we don't have an applicant, I'm going to close the public comment period. Public comment period is closed and bring it back to the commission for questions for Mr. Coons. Mr. Goodwin.
Yeah, and when we worked on this was all laying the groundwork for being able to have discussions with applicants about the impact on county services. Do you have any idea when we might be able to put such a process in place?
So
I know we didn't talk about that. We knew that was one of the use that we were looking at, but
If Planning Commission makes a recommendation today, it would go to the Board of Supervisors, and if the Board of Supervisors adopts it, then it'd be part of the comprehensive plan, and the expectation is staff would use that in the next staff report. So starting
better
immediately.
move on it that quick.
Yes, I mean, it's part of the comprehensive plan. The
like it.
expectation is
I like it.
staff uses the comprehensive plan to, you know, when we review the staff reports, that's what it's doing, is comparing it to the comprehensive plan. So
You make my heart happy. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Everything move that quick.
Mr. Coons, one item, and this just struck me, and I don't know that I have the question formulated completely correctly, but, you know, you're going to clarify it for me one way or the other. So when you remove the, or take the calls that had to do with the schools and apply them to residences, were you using any, do you need to adjust or prorate those calls in any way, or is it a one-for-one, they move, this number of calls moves from here to here, and we don't need to make any changes or prorations or adjustments?
yeah, luckily, since dispatch is so consistent with how they track things, what I was able to do is get a one-for-one, and I pulled it out. So what I'll be able to do is take that batch, because I've got each school, LCHS, LCMS, and pull those calls for service, and I'll just put them in with residential. George has seen my spreadsheets all over the place, but I'll be able to pull them to residential, and it should be pretty much one for one. But what happens is when I reduce the calls for service for non-residential and increase the residential, the calls for service per resident and per business are going to change. So that's going to be the only change that happens when it goes to the board.
Okay, I know we don't, I guess it's not really an issue because, well, when we look at residences, you have calls for a residence. So if you're adding a residence, then you can say, well, the impact is this much. When you get a call for school, if that call is for one student, then each residence doesn't have one student. So this is what I'm talking about, a proration. So I mean, there's like X number of students per resident accounted for. Is there anything that needs to be adjusted in those numbers to true them up?
So the
Because you're affecting then the number of, the impact per residence.
I would agree with you, but the calls for service for the schools kind of is a wide variety. You know, some it's anything from a fight to suspicious activity in the parking lot at 2 o'clock in the morning. So any of us could be at the high school parking lot at 2 o'clock in the morning. So that's, because of that, I would just lean it towards residential calls.
Okay.
Because then you'll have the number of calls, and then we'll divide it by the number of households and the number of population. And then that'll be more accurate than accounting it for a business.
Yeah, okay.
So
All right.
it's not gonna be perfect, but I think it'd be relatively accurate.
Okay. Any other questions?
Mr. Chair, I'd like to make a statement.
Mr. Goodwin?
This was a enjoyable process to work on, and I want to thank staff. I want to thank Commissioner Dickerson and the two representatives of the board. I think staff gave us something very, very solid to start off with. It was not a blank sheet of paper, and I thank you for that.
So there being no more questions, Mr. Goodwin, since you had such effort on this, would you be willing to make a motion?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, I would like to move that we forward with a recommendation for adoption, CPA 2024-01, Public Facilities Section to the Comprehensive Plan.
Second.
And so we have a motion to forward this for adoption and inclusion in the comprehensive plan. Does that include the amendment that Mr. Coons asked for to make the adjustment in the numbers for the schools to the
I'll add a
residences?
parenthetical phrase, as presented.
Very good. And you agree with them? Very good. So we have a motion and a second to approve CPA 2024-01. Any further discussion? Ms. Johnson, would you do a roll call vote, please?
Mr. Brooks?
Yes?
Mr. Weaver?
Yes.
Mr. Disasway?
Yes.
Mr. Kersey?
Yes.
Mr. Cross?
Yes.
Mr. Goodwin?
Yes.
Mr. Dickerson?
Yes.
Very good. Motion passes. And thank you all for that very much. Let me, moving on to new business, let me mention to everyone, as it was requested of me tonight as I walked in the door, to be sure you have received your disclosure form for 2024. That's due February 1st, not at the February meeting. So if you would make an effort to get that taken care of before February 1st, we appreciate that very much.
And don't forget to put your name on it like I did.
Right, don't forget to put Gordon's name on it. So, all right, I think that takes care of our new business for now. Don't really have a discussion item tonight, so we'll move on to, well, I'm sorry, we do. Mr.
Well, I think
Quarles.
we have a new member
You're exactly right. How terrible of me.
that we have to acknowledge.
How terrible of me. I should have done that at the beginning.
It's okay.
So,
There's
yes.
time.
Yes, so.
Just let him have it a little longer.
We got 30-some minutes before we have to vote to extend.
No,
You just let him
we
hide a
certainly,
little longer without,
we want to welcome Mr. Kersey from the Louisa District joining us, replacing Mr. Woodward, and say we're happy to have you with us.
I appreciate the opportunity. I look forward to serving.
Very good. Thank you.
and wish everybody a happy new year.
Absolutely.
You.
Mr.
And-
Chairman, I
and-
yield back.
Thank you. And I do think there's one other thing we ought to consider here before we go to reports, and that is that we probably should I don't remember if we did it in December or not, but we should have a resolution drafted thanking
Mr. Woodward.
Commissioner Woodward for his 4 years of service with us.
Yep.
So, and if we could maybe encourage him to attend whenever we get that ready, we'll present it to him in person.
Second that.
Or we could go to the board meeting and present it there.
Well, that would be an interesting
Say, surprise,
presentation, wouldn't it?
surprise.
All right, very good.
You could do it under the stuff that's not, what is it, the?
Open mic night.
I don't know if they have it, do they?
Yeah, they do, public
Okay,
address.
public address?
Public address. They
That's
do.
what we
It's a
have
public
every,
address.
All
that's
right.
what we have every night when Ellis is away.
All right, let's move on to reports. Mr. Gillespie.
Thanks, Si.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members. All right, so this is my first report of 2024. I will do my best to get you all out on time. I do have 5 items I'd like to go over. I'd like to talk about people, places, policies, process, and projects. We touched on every one of those tonight. So I was also going to welcome new Commissioner Kersey and just recognize that in addition to, other people, in December, I had the honor and the blessing to brief the new members of the Board of Supervisors in those districts in Cuckoo and in Louisa. And fortunately for them, it was more than a week later that I went out with flu, but I did go out with flu, so I personally was absent from your last meeting. This is my first meeting of 2024. But in addition to the new members on the board and the briefs on programs and priorities to them, we have a new member on the Planning Commission, and you all remember in the last 2 years, those who are new members, including Mr. Woodward, who is new, and Mr. Dickerson, the training that you received in various settings. And so we've had a conversation about a training opportunity that's offered at the state level for Commissioner Kersey. There is some cost to that, so I budgeted for it, and you all have it out of your training fund. There's a training fund and education fund for Planning Commission members. It's not unlimited, and so part of the benefit of having Dr. Chandler come here and, indoctrinate you, if you will, as a group, was we could save some money on doing individual registrations through the program. So it will be our first certified planning commissioner training that we have in the recent time since it's moved to VCU. So he'll be able to report back. It's always good to have a student then share his knowledge with others. You get to know the subject better, but also he can tell you about the value of that program.
Will Dr. Chandler be offering that?
Dr. Chandler is going to be working with others and offering that in a group setting. Yes. Yep.
At VCU?
So his, I'm sorry?
At VCU?
It is at VCU. One thing that's come out of the pandemic is they had a lot of virtual participation in classes. So half the classes right now are in, the classes themselves as a class. The way it's set up is there are 2 days on the front and then homework for about a month and a half and then 2 days at the end. Each one of the classes, this will be the 112th classes in January through April, and the 113th class is March through May. I think I have that right. The January sessions will all be in person in Richmond. The sessions that begin in March will all be virtual from wherever they may be. And so there'll be 2 virtual days and then homework and then 2 more virtual days for that session. So again, we're going to have Mr. Kersey go through in his first year on the Louisa County Planning Commission. So in addition to learning programs and priorities, again, we've kind of shared those from the Community Development Department and Planning and Zoning priorities, as well as, building and everything else we do in the department with the board members. We have had to bring Mr. Kersey into new systems and new tools, and, God help everybody who, is carrying that tablet around and doing the voting, which we're still trying to get worked out. But we are working on those tools. Just a reminder, there's a new member of the Board of Building Adjustments, and that's Doug Barmoy. So we have another new face in our panoply of community development. All the members on the BZA remain the same in 2024. We do have 2 staff openings in the planning and in the department, specifically within the Planning and Zoning Division, from an opening from September and another from November. We're looking for a planner and a planning technician or planning and zoning technician. On the places side, a lot of things going on, but just to focus on the growth areas of Shannon Hill, Zion Crossroads, Lake Anna, Louisa, and Mineral and Ferncliff. The business park development has begun, starting with the water tower at Shannon Hill, and then moving on to site development. Zion Crossroads, the Hampton Inn is coming to open probably in April. There's a wellness spa that is going to go in a newly completed construction. They're going to finish out space that's not been finished before in the Spring Creek Business Park, and that's under the Rhett's Grill building. If you all know that, it's the backside of the backside, if you will. That's exciting to finish that building off. The meeting space, some of the meeting space was converted in the last couple months at the Best Western into 3 new hotel rooms, so it's kind of a repurposing of space. Again, all in Zion Crossroads, and of course, new phases of Spring Creek development have continued apace for a couple years now. Lake Anna residential development continues. The Wares Crossing roundabout is under way through final design and acquisition, going into construction. We're getting pretty close working with them on where the laydown areas are going to be. In Louisa, in the growth area outside of town, we have Better Future Farms and Louisa Self-Storage, and then in town, we've seen some projects, particularly commercial, and some mixed-use projects, as well as a lot of renovations of commercial buildings and of civic buildings, of which we've been responsible for. So there have been construction projects and activities around town, around the town of Louisa from the county of Louisa. In Mineral, Mayor Jarvis has already reported new and renovated housing, and it continues. All of you who are in Mineral on a pretty regular basis know that new houses are going up and houses are being renovated. It's exciting to see. In Ferncliff, at the business park, we continue to have some of those shell buildings and shell spaces converted into occupied spaces, and some reconverted and repurposed. And you know, that's tens of thousands of square feet at a time, so that's a significant change in the Ferncliff growth area. On the policy side, with the comprehensive plan amendment to add the appendix with sections for public facilities, and with the CIP that's adopted and now currently under consideration for you in your meeting next month, we'll have a lot more to be looking at in our evaluations of proposals for planning and zoning applications that are made with the supporting data that you've just seen tonight and made approval of as part of your vision and your consideration criteria. Also in policies, we have those that come from citizens, the board, planning commission. You looked at a policy last month in this on Lake Anna and the shoreline development review and what the goal, the objective, the overall policy is. But in the end, it's a new year and new priorities. So you have a new chair and continuation of the chair, but you have a chair and a vice chair. So, you know, please help us realize the policies from the priorities of the Board of Supervisors, but also the priorities that you all want to emphasize. And then lastly, the growth areas and the gateways, which I mentioned earlier in a report. Again, my orders there are to focus on access control, shared driveways, and interconnected development, which are already in the plan, but not codified. On the process side, talked about Lake Anna Shoreline and how that process may change, again, to the benefit of the citizen, to give them a review process that is not duplicative and is consistent one organization to the other. And just some quick list of projects from 2023 wrapping up and going into 2024. We need to produce an annual report. I would like to work with the chair on that and any other person you may designate to work on the annual report. We're continuing our Civic Gov planning and zoning application software, so that will change the way that we operate to have a public-facing portal where people can get into cases a little more easily. And some of the data that's going with an application, the way we work on an application, and the closeout and the access to data will be easier to get to. We're excited about that. It's part of a kind of a digital citizen initiative, which is part of Louisa County's communication strategy to make sure that we're doing the best we can to give people the information that is important to them. We concluded the zoning evaluation of the 13 ag and forestal districts. And then just to point at the growth area gateways, those are projects that I'm working on right now. So that's my report for 2024. Again, new year, new priorities. Please help me know what you want to focus on. Thank you.
Very good. Any questions, any questions for Mr. Gillespie? Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I give them to him all the time.
You'll get 'em
I
later.
don't- I don't wait for a special occasion.
All right, then we
He
can,
knows that.
we can move forward to the last item on the agenda, which is motion
Yes.
to adjourn.
You're losing,
You
you're
have-
losing it.
Hit that. We are adjourned. Thank you all.
We're gonna name that pickleball facility after George.